We're gonna talk about my favorite men's makeup of 2024. These are products that can of course be used by anyone, but I specifically use these in natural and subtle ways to enhance my masculine features. I am Mattis, I make men's beauty content, so if you're interested in that, make sure to subscribe and say hi in the comments. And let's get right into it, starting with the complexion category. And if you've been watching my channel, these won't be new to you. The first one is my favorite all over light coverage skin concealer. Now personally, I don't use foundation at all, so a light coverage concealer sort of takes the place of an all over coverage product. I am currently looking into trying more BB creams, tinted moisturizers and things of that nature, so if you have any good ones that you love, please let me know in the comments because I want to find those really good ones for you. But hands down, the complexion product I used the most in recent months is the Skin Mimetic Concealer by Make Beauty. Starting with the design of the bottle, it's this beautiful, very simple, minimalistic design, this sort of glass container, and then it has this little window that actually shows you how much is left of the product, which actually is really handy. Now it has this really interesting long wand, and the great thing about this concealer is that it's so easily spreadable and it always looks completely natural on the skin. By the way, I'm wearing all of these products on my face today. This, when I received it from the brand actually sent this to me kindly. I was so surprised. I've never found a concealer like this before that mimics skin so effortlessly. It's so thin, so it really spreads out and melts away, but it still has somewhat of a good coverage. I would say this is like a light to medium coverage. It's not really the concealer if you have acne, if you really want to cover spots and really intense pigmentation. It's more to generally even out the skin tone, to take down some redness. That's what this concealer is perfect for. And that's what I have been using it for. You know, some shadowy bits around the mouth area, some general discoloration. It is a sort of lightly hydrating concealer. It's not overly glowy though, so it will be very natural looking on the skin. I think pretty much any skin type can get away with this. Unless your skin is dry like the Sahara Desert and you really need the most hydrating concealers, or if your skin is so oily that you need something extremely matte, I think this covers most bases and I really highly recommend it. Because this is so specific though, and it's not really meant for spot coverage, I will also talk about this NARS concealer in a different category. And this category is the spot coverage, high coverage concealers. And this is my favorite, the best of the best that I have used and tried in 2024. Now these products are not necessarily new. They are not necessarily new to the market in 2024. They're just the ones that I have favorited and loved the most in this year. Now what I love about the NARS Soft Matte Concealer is that it is such a high coverage, but it still manages to look really natural. Because of this really matte finish, it really blurs any imperfections on the skin easily. And also it's just easy to use. So for those of you who have more intense pigmentation issues, spots, etc., the NARS Soft Matte Concealer is highly recommended. I should have probably started with the primer category, but oh well. These are my two favorite primers of the year, and I'm gonna mention both of them because they're so different. So this would be my favorite blurring, sort of mattifying primer, and it's by L'Oreal. It is a silicone primer, but silicones are not the enemy. Silicones are actually great ingredients that beautifully smooth over the skin. They can really soften the skin. They can actually really help formulas to just be better. So we should never vilify them. This is a beautiful pore blurring primer. So wherever you have intense pores, like I have them around the nose, this is where I love using this to just give a sort of smooth blurring effect. Now personally, I wouldn't really spend a high amount on a primer like this because it's not really an expensive formula to create, and there are many really affordable options out there. So I really recommend this drugstore one by L'Oreal. However, when it comes to the Illuminating Primer category, I actually like to splurge a little bit more. This is by Charlotte Tilbury, the Hollywood Flawless Filter. I know there are alternatives to this out there that you can use and love because they're also great, but I just love the experience of this one personally. I have the color 4, which is just a little bit deeper than my skin, and I use it under any other complexion product sort of as a first step or as a highlighter. You can even use this on the body as a highlighter too. The great thing about this is that it has a very light coverage to it, which sort of, again, blurs imperfections. But if you have really oily skin, I wouldn't really use this all over. I use this more as a highlighter on the outer sides of my face, so sort of the cheeks, the jaw area, sometimes even the nose, but it just gives you the most beautiful airbrushing glow to the skin. I also just really enjoy the glass container with this really beautiful luxurious design. It's easy to use. You can even use this mixed into a moisturizer, for example, and just use it all over if you have really dry skin. There's multiple different ways to use this, and therefore this goes down as my favorite illuminating primer of 2024. Moving on to contour, and this is something that I'm really passionate about. I always talk about contour. There's probably not a video of me out there where I don't mention contour somewhere, but I just think that contour is the one thing that really enhances sort of masculine features really beautifully. And it's really hard for me to decide which contour to put in this position. I went with the Dior contour that came out this year because this was definitely one of the two that I've been using the most. But I will also mention the Westman Atelier contour stick. Both of these are brilliant. I would say though that the Westman Atelier contour stick is a hint more beginner friendly because the coverage just isn't as high, whereas the pigment in this is really, really high. So you need only a very small amount of the Dior contour. Both are brilliant though, and what I do love about the Dior one is that the color is really, really cool, whereas the color of the lightest Westman Atelier contour stick is a little bit more neutral, almost a little bit warm leaning, so actually can be a little bit too warm for those really fair skin tones. But yeah, both fantastic formulas, both highly recommended, both also quite luxurious and high price tags. So if you would like me to talk about some of my favorite more affordable products, I'm happy to create a video on that too. Moving on to powder contour, and there are many powder contours that I've tried over the years. The Kevyn Aucoin powder contour also comes to mind. It's a great product, but I have to say I dabbled in some K-Beauty contours recently, and the Romand palette is just incredible. There's something about these K-Beauty formulas that is so silky smooth. The way it blends on the skin almost melts away and becomes imperceivable. I also love the creative design of this particular contour. You sort of have this middle section with 3 different contour colors from the lightest to the deepest. Then you have a sort of brightening, highlighting powder shade over here. And here you have a shade that you can cool down with, I believe. I don't completely understand the purpose of these outer powders. I have not really used them as much as the middle section, but the middle section alone is worth the whole compact in my opinion. It's just beautiful on the skin. I like that in the winter I can use more of this side, the sort of lighter side, and then when I go more bronzy, like today actually, I can go more into these deeper shades and mix them all together. And yeah, it's a beautiful compact. I use this on my face to really sculpt the cheekbones, but I also use this around my eyes, almost like an eyeshadow. And there are 2 color options, which actually is quite miserable. K-beauty brands notoriously have a very limited color selection and they don't go deep enough. And this is something that needs to change. But for light to medium skin tones, this is a beautiful option. Now moving on to blush, and this is one of probably the most favorite category of all categories for me. So I'm embarrassed to admit that I sort of picked 3 instead of 1, but maybe we can narrow it down somewhat. Let's start with a liquid blush. And as a liquid blush, I chose the Say Beauty blush, the Say Beauty Dew Blush it's called, in the color Cutie. And this type of shade just has to be one of my favorite shades that exists because it has a hint of warmth to it, but it's also not completely orange. It's sort of neutral enough, but on the skin, it really fakes a sort of sunburned look. Now you can see how bright it is, but on the skin, this is actually what it looks like. I really applied it quite sheerly today, and I think this is a great all year round shade if you have sort of light to medium skin like I do. Now this is great if you have dry skin, if you have combination skin. If you're really oily and you're trying to avoid anything that has glow in it, you might want to go with something that is a bit more matte and long lasting. Like the Nude Sticks Nudies, I have the color Beach Babe. And this is a very similar concept in terms of the color. Again, sort of warm, peachy, but a little bit more rusty. Actually, I wouldn't say rusty. It's a bit more almost mauvey, watermelony, if that makes any sense. It has a little bit more coolness to it compared to the color Cutie by Say. But what is so great about these matte nude sticks formulas is that they really last on the skin all day long. And as my favorite cream blush, I also have to mention the MAC Glow Play blush in the color Blush Please. Now this in comparison is a lot more nude in color. Okay, so I swatched it here for you, and you can see the color is a lot more nude and rosy compared to these really vibrant looking shades. When you share these out, you still get a similar effect to the Glow Play blush by MAC, but what I love about this is that it's the easiest blush I've ever tried. The easiest blush that I've literally ever put on my face, because you just swipe it on, you tap it out with your fingers, and you suddenly have the most perfect flush to your skin. There's really barely any blending needed with a formula like this. And for a really effortless cream blush, this is my favorite of 2024. Now I have to say, I tend to choose a cream or a liquidy blush at the moment over powder most days of the week. But there is something to having a good, reliable powder formula in your collection as well. And my favorite powder blush of 2024 is by Pat McGrath, and it's the color Flirtatious. And this actually, I'm going to compare it to the MAC one because I expect that the color is somewhat similar. And yeah, sure enough, they're both sort of a rosy nude. I would say that Flirtatious here by Pat McGrath is actually even more neutral, sort of a dusty nude, whereas this has still a little bit more saturation to it. Now a powder blush is great to have if you have really oily skin, you want to avoid any excess glow on your skin, but also if you want to top off your blush. If you, for example, wear a cream blush and you just want to increase the longevity, you can actually use a blush like this on top of it to just set it in place. Or even if you did all your makeup, you just wanted to touch up your blush a little bit further, but it's already dried down, this is actually a great way to just add a little bit more. And this is actually one of the scenarios I use this a lot for. I really love the color Flirtatious. It's sort of this really neutral nude color that you can never go wrong with. But of course, again, this is for my skin tone, for really light skin tone. So please always adjust it to yourself. If you have deeper skin than me, you want to still go with a richer, more intense, vibrant shade than this if you want the same effect. But if you have quite light skin to lightly medium skin, this would work beautifully on you. Now, Pat McGrath, of course, is a luxury brand, and the formula really reflects that. The quality is really high, really easily blendable, and also gives you a beautiful sort of satin sheen to the skin that is kind of blurring at the same time. I want to move on to my favorite bronzer, and it's actually by Charlotte Tilbury. And I was actually showing you the complete wrong side. This is the right one. It's this really gorgeous reflective compact, and then when you open it, it has this really massive, gorgeous cream bronzer inside. Now this is actually a new one because I'm embarrassed to show you my old one that I'm still working through. This went through probably 2 summers with me, and you know, it's really used up. So I don't want to show you this bronzer too long, but just as evidence that I really love this product. And now we'll go back to the new one. The brand actually sent this to me, which I'm extremely grateful for because I couldn't keep showing this one on camera. And yeah, it's my absolute favorite cream bronzer. Actually, it is my favorite of all bronzers, even powder bronzers, because of the incredible formula. This is sort of a matte finish. Actually, it's quite matte. It's quite blurring on the skin. But I've never found a bronzer like this that so easily blends into the skin. You don't have to work hard. It doesn't bunch up and get all messy and dirty looking like a lot of bronzers sadly do. And also, I love the colors that they created. This is actually the lightest color, and I'm a very fair boy, you know? I can't get away with orange bronzers. And this almost has a coolness to it. It's a really extremely neutral and quite light color for a bronzer, and therefore I really love it because it never looks fake on me. This always looks realistic. It lasts really well. It has a beautiful compact with a huge mirror as well, which is really handy. I actually always use this and bring this on vacation with me because, you know, hotels, they're not always reliable in terms of having mirror with good lighting. So having one of these is actually really essential. If I could only use one bronzer, it would be absolutely this. There's so much you can do with it because it's sort of a neutral color. I even contour with this sometimes. I can use it on my eyes, sort of as a sculpting eyeshadow. And yeah, can't go wrong with this. Highly recommend these. Let me know if you try them, if you love them too. Now, sticking with the theme of something really glowing on the skin, this is the Westman Atelier highlighter. Now, the packaging alone is just a piece of art. It has this beautiful gold clap that actually has a magnetic closure, and it's beautifully weighted as well. Now, the color I have is called Nectar, and I couldn't recommend it enough. Now you can see that it has a sort of peachy, rosy tint to it, but no matter what skin tone you are, this will never show up as a sort of blushy color because it doesn't really have coverage. It just adds the most gorgeous glow to the skin. The way I use it, I just take some on my finger and then just dab on top of any bronzer, blush, etc. that I have, just carefully as to not disturb any product underneath. And it will just give you the most realistic looking wet glow to the skin. You know, it's not one of those metallic sort of fake looking highlighters. It really looks like your skin is actually glowing like that. Now, from what I've heard, it doesn't work as well if you are wearing foundation underneath. It's best to use on bare skin. But I don't really use foundation or coverage in that area anyway, so for me this works really, really well. Now moving on to something that I forgot in the complexion category, and it's an under eye corrector, and it's by the brand Charlotte Tilbury again. I know there's many favorites from the brand, but I just love the brand. I love the design. I used to work for the brand, and this is just genuinely a brilliant product. Good under eye correctors are still sadly kind of hard to find, but this is a great one. So it's sort of a peachy pinky color, great for really light skins, but the brand of course also offers deeper shades for deeper skin tones too. Now, I never recommend a really brightening under eye concealer, especially if you want to enhance your masculine features. I just think it never looks great if you plaster on a really bright concealer underneath your eyes. I would just rather you use an under eye corrector, something like a peachy shade, or if you have deeper skin, a sort of orange or even red shade will cancel out those shadows and pigmentation around the eyes much more easily than a high coverage concealer. And then if you still need a concealer on top of that, you can do that. Personally, I don't use a concealer on top of that. I just really sheerly apply some of this peachy pinky tone and then call it a day. It just warms up and cancels out those icy tones under the eyes without looking too heavy. Now, eyeshadows is another category I'm really, really passionate about because I think actually eyeshadows are highly underrated for men's faces because you can beautifully sculpt the eyes and contour the eyes with an eyeshadow. I'm going to start with my favorite liquid eyeshadow of the year, and it's actually by the brand Lisa Eldridge, which is an incredible makeup artist here on YouTube that I actually learned a lot from over the years. And she created these liquid silk eyeshadows that are just brilliant. To me, this is the easiest eyeshadow that I've ever tried. You just need a little dot and then pat it out with the finger, and you're left with a beautiful eyeshadow that really sculpts the eyes. I would describe the color as a sort of latte brown. It sort of has a little bit of that milkiness in it. It has some warmth to it, which actually is interesting. Now, my goal usually with eyeshadow is to sculpt the eyes. This I can still get away with, but for the future, I would love if she could also bring out a shade that is a hint more neutral, almost a little bit more cool toned, ashy leaning, so you can really contour with it. But when I'm a bit more bronzed up and tan, as I am right now, this works beautiful as an eyeshadow and contour. And the same goes for my favorite cream eyeshadow stick, which is by NARS. So you can see it's actually fairly similar in color. This one, you have the ease of a twist up stick, which is really handy. I have mentioned before that the packaging annoys me a little bit because the cap has actually broken. The pen hasn't dried up yet. I feel like it's maybe a little bit drier than what it used to be, but I still do use it and I still recommend it. Hopefully the one you get won't break as easily as mine did. Now, these eyeshadow sticks actually blend best with a brush. I like a quite dense brush This is actually a brush I believe that is meant for concealer, but it really works well to blend out a cream or a liquid eyeshadow too. With brushes, I always say make them your own. You can use brushes in whatever way works for you. You can sort of ignore what they're meant for. There's so many times where I use a highlighter brush, for example. This one is actually a highlighter brush. I use it as a contour brush or as a powder brush. You can really ignore what they're meant for and just use them the way you want to. As a single powder eyeshadow, my favorite one goes to the MAC powder eyeshadow in the color Sandstone. Now this is sort of a close tie because I also love the shade Omega. Omega is a little bit lighter, so if you're really fair, Omega is an amazing contour for the eyes. But Sandstone I use more because most of the time I'm a little bit bronzed up, so this works really well. You know what I like about MAC is that whatever color you can think of, they usually have it. And having one of these really small eyeshadows in your kit is just great because it's so portable. You can just toss it in your bag. If you want a little bit of a contour touch-up, this is great to have. My favorite eyeshadow palette of the year is another Charlotte Tilbury product, and it's the Super Nudes palette. Now immediately you see how tiny this is. So for an eyeshadow that actually has quite a lot of eyeshadows, it's really portable and easy to carry with you. Also really light. It has all the colors I personally need, to be very honest. I just don't do a very experimental eyeshadow look on a daily basis. I usually use just one color and it's right here. It's this beautiful sort of sandy contour taupe shade, but it's really handy to have a black in your kit somewhere, and this is a really creamy, great one. And I also love to play with these sort of warm tones here. You know, particularly in the summer when I'm a bit more bronzed up, or even in the fall and autumn, it's nice to have those warm tones to experiment a little bit and go a little bit smoky while still staying really subtle and natural. Now this is that shade I love so much, Swatched. It's just the most perfect shade. This is always the shade I'm after because it just creates the most effortless, easy contour for every day. But it's also the formula. It's just really easy to work with. I just don't need a really high pigment palette. I need shadows that go on easily, that blend easily, and that give me the results I want effortlessly. And this is exactly that. The colors are pigmented enough, they melt into the skin and just look perfect within a few swipes. Now for the eyes, I also wanted to mention this tool that I got really recently. It's a lash curler by the brand Shu Uemura, and this is a very specific lash curler. It's not one of those that goes around the whole lash band and sort of curls all of the lashes at once. It actually goes in sections, so it's quite small and short, which is really nice because it's just so much easier to use. You can easily go into your lashes and curl them, and you don't have the whole procedure of doing this and this and having that moment of fear every time you use a lash curler. I also just find that just curling the outer lashes is just a bit more flattering on my eyes. I think it's a little bit more masculine not to have all of the lashes sort of go up, because that gives a bit more of that round-eyed look, which actually can look really sweet and innocent. But I want to go more for that sort of mysterious sort of hunter eye look and just sort of lift up the outer corners of the lashes. And for that, this is brilliant. And it's really high quality. You can really get a good curl with this. And then on to my favorite mascara, which I discovered this year and actually repurchased already this year because the first one I had, I lost, but it's just too good for me not to have one in my collection because I actually use this really frequently. I'm wearing it right now and you can see how sheer and natural it looks. It's the color Ash, so it's not a black mascara, which actually I think looks a bit unnatural on me. It's just a bit too dark for me. So I really like that I have a mascara that is sort of ashy. It's not too intense. It really holds a curl, which is crucial with my lashes because they really stick down and they don't want to go up. So I have to curl them and then I have to put on a mascara for them to stay up. This really lengthens them, but it doesn't add volume, which I want to avoid. It's also a really small wand, so it's actually really easy to use. You know, those really big fat wands, they can be really hard to use and you sort of get clumps all over, but this really is brilliant. Now moving on to brows, and brows are so important to me. I love my brows. My brows are a feature that I always want to highlight. So I'm actually really sad that I've run out and can't currently show you my favorite brow pen of the year, which is actually my favorite brow pen of the last 5 years. And it's by the brand NYX. I'll put in an image somewhere here, but it's just such a great brow pen. I will say you probably need a little bit of practice with it because it's like a little felt tip pen and you can really precisely draw hair where you want them and it looks really realistic and amazing. But because I've run out of mine and I have to repurchase it, I won't talk about it too long and we'll move on to brow gel. My favorite brow gel is actually the Big Bush Brow Gel by Urban Decay. I talk about this all the time. It's just amazing. It does everything. It deposits some color. It adds quite a bit of volume to the brows. It looks natural. It keeps them in place. It just does everything. I also actually really like the design of it and the name Big Bush Brow Gel just is really funny. Now I'm going to talk about my favorite setting spray and then we're going to finish up with lips. My favorite setting spray of the year is actually by L'Oreal and this is funny because people are really divided on this one. There are a lot of people who actually hate this product and I kind of get it because it does remind, like the experience reminds me of hairspray. It smells a bit like hairspray. But it's great. It's if you use this on a special occasion only, this is amazing. It's not really a product I would use every single day just because, yeah, it kind of feels like putting hairspray on your face. But for nights out or for special occasions where you really need your makeup to last, not to run, this is amazing because it just sets everything in place. It's the 3-second setting mist by L'Oreal. And it really is that. It just sets everything in place and there's nothing for you to worry about anymore. I tested this. I went to the gym wearing a full face of makeup and putting this on top and it literally looked amazing even after that. Great, great setting spray and also you can get it at the drugstore. And now onto lips. And for me, MAC has really won this category this year. They just have some of the best lip liners on the market. The colors are sophisticated. The formula just glides on, and even if you go over it repeatedly, you still get a really even effect, which even some luxury lip liners don't do that. They sort of bunch up, they get crunchy, crusty, whatever. These don't do that. They just glide on beautifully, they last beautifully, and the colors are great. Now I'm showing you two, which again, I'm cheating a bit, but I discovered Subculture this year. And I've always loved Whirl. Whirl has always been my favorite. It's a great sort of brown rose shade and it just almost mimics my lip color exactly. But Subculture is very much the same vibe, but just a hint lighter. So you can see Subculture and Whirl. If your skin is sort of lighter than mine, I would go with Subculture. If your skin is like mine or deeper than mine, I would go with Whirl. Just great ones to have in your kit. Yeah, I will always go back to these. And then my favorite lip combo has actually been the two of these with Viva Planet on top of it. Viva Planet is actually quite a light sort of rosy nude shade, but I find, I'm actually wearing it right now, when I blot on a shade like this, I can really overline my lips quite a bit, but because I take some of that color down, it doesn't look like I'm wearing a full-on overlined lip. It still just looks like I have really big, juicy lips that are just not too prominent and in your face. It's sort of cheating because you make your lips look much bigger with the liners. Like I've really, really overlined my lips, but then because I take down the pigments with a lipstick like this a little bit, I find that it still looks effortless and not too overdone. I'm actually currently testing some more nude lipsticks. That's something I really want to explore more in the year of 2025. So please let me know your favorite options for nude lips that look really natural in the comments. And yeah, before I forget, I almost skipped this one. This is my favorite powder of the year. This is the Makeup Forever Loose Powder, and this is just magnificent. I talk about this all the time. The mechanism is just brilliant because it has this net and you just put your brush into the net and immediately it deposits the powder and you can go straight onto your face. It's just the easiest to use loose powder I've ever found. And it also just looks so blurring on the face. It really mattifies the skin. This is an all-rounder, amazing powder. But yes, we're at the end. We made it through. Now it's your turn. I really want to know your list, your favorite products of 2024 in all the categories that I mentioned. Comment them below. I'm so curious. Or even if you just mention a few, that's also fine. Whatever you can. I'm so excited to connect with you as always in the comments. It's always so much fun. And thank you so much for welcoming me on this platform. The amount of amazing comments and sweet messages I've been receiving is just overwhelming. I'm so excited and happy and really looking forward to what 2025 has in store for us. Make sure to subscribe and we'll see each other next time. Bisous bisous, yours truly.